Stop right there. That's mine. Ronan's voice quivered on the edge of mortified and furious as he stumbled forward on the battered metal deck of his makeshift cargo bay. He'd returned from a routine salvage run to find a tall, lithe alien woman pressing the stretchy elastic band of his boxers to her delicately sloped nose. They were plain black and suspiciously tattered from countless voyages, hardly anything worth stealing, yet there she stood, inhaling like she just found the most decadent perfume in the galaxy. He tripped over a loose fuel hose in his haste to retrieve the garment from her, face flushing with embarrassment. But instead of fleeing or apologizing, she fixed him with an unblinking gaze from large, vividly turquoise eyes and let out a low, almost hungry-sounding hum. A wave of heat rushed to Ronan's cheeks. He tried to snatch the boxers away, but her grip was unexpectedly firm. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for you checking out my ride, but usually, we start with a handshake, he muttered, forcing a grin that crumbled under the intensity of her stare. Her slender fingers tightened a fraction more on the waistband, the tension between them pulling the fabric taut. He swallowed hard, not sure what to do next, not sure of who she was, or why she was rummaging through his personal quarters in the bowels of a half-derelict ship. The overhead lights flickered, revealing patterns across her skin that looked like faint luminescent lines curling around her arms, across her collarbone, and disappearing beneath the short, tattered cloak hanging from her shoulders. Her nose twitched. Then, with startling abruptness, she let go and took a step closer to him. She pressed her face near the crook of his neck, inhaling deeply in a way that threatened to short-circuit his composure. A gentle, pulsing glow lit up her throat when she sniffed, as though her body reacted to sense the way a human might react to a sudden jolt of adrenaline. "Hey!" he yelped, leaning back against a bulkhead, effectively cornered. "Personal space." But the spaceship's corridor was narrow, and she seemed not at all shy about invading it. Her lips parted, revealing teeth sharper than a human's but not quite fangs. She stared unblinkingly, then inhaled once more. A shiver shot up his spine. "You smell strange," she said, voice low and resonant, accented with a throaty click. "I had no idea anyone was aboard. I needed supplies." Her fingers brushed the side of his head, tangling for a moment in his short-cropped hair before he jerked away. It felt oddly intimate, like a curious cat sniffing a newcomer, and the way her pupils dilated gave him the sense she was trying to read him on a chemical level. "Okay, supplies." He managed to push her arm away and stepped to the side. "Does that include my underwear?" She cocked her head, luminous lines pulsing in what might have been confusion. "You humans wrap your loins in cloth. It holds your scent so strongly." An involuntary laugh caught in his throat. "Yeah. We sure do." He still held the crumpled boxers in one hand, feeling ridiculous. "Who are you?" Her body language went still, tension collecting in her shoulders. "Zarani." A single word, calm and assured, like the name alone explained everything. Ronan sighed, scanning her form for any sign of weapons. Apart from the faintly glowing markings and the swirling patterns across her cobalt-hued skin, she looked defenseless. Her limbs were slender, her torso cloaked but revealing glimpses of toned musculature at her midsection. There was a fleeting notion in his mind that she was dangerous, not because he saw a blaster or blade, but because her presence radiated a sort of primal confidence. In his experience, that always spelled trouble. "Ronan," he offered, though he doubted she cared. The glow around her shoulders brightened for an instant as she repeated his name under her breath. He realized with a start that she was pronouncing it precisely, matching his accent, as though memorizing it. "What are you doing on my ship, Zarani?" "I boarded to escape a band of scavengers," she said, voice dropping. "I needed a place to hide, and your airlock was open." He groaned, mentally kicking himself for leaving the outer hull door partly disabled. He'd assumed the lonely outpost was deserted. "Look, it's not safe here. My ship's half a wreck. I'm scraping parts from the station to keep it limping along, so if you want to ride somewhere, I'm not the best bet." She watched his mouth move, as though focusing on every word. "I prefer this to captivity." Something about her voice made him believe she was telling the truth. "Fine, but I'm running low on supplies and I'm not." I'm not a smuggler or anything. If you're being hunted, that's your business, but I don't want trouble. He shook his head, stuffing the battered boxers into the side pocket of his cargo pants. Why'd you sniff them anyway? She blinked, confusion flooding her features. It's how my species discerns compatibility. Scent is vital. It helps us gauge who we can trust. The corners of her lips quirked, hinting at amusement. I've never known a human to put so many chemicals on their body. Some men I encountered reeked of synthetics, but you smell more raw. His stomach flipped. I can't decide if that's a compliment or an insult. He took a deep breath, tapping a finger against the side of his utility belt. Look, I'd be lying if I said this conversation wasn't weird. But fine, you can hide here. You just owe me an explanation. And no more rummaging through my stuff. The flicker of her markings suggested some internal reaction he didn't understand. No rummaging. I promise. But she leaned in once more, just enough to catch another hint of his natural scent, before stepping back. A swirl of tension and curiosity hung in the recycled air. He wondered if letting her stay was the biggest mistake he'd made in months or a blessing in disguise that would keep him from drifting into lonely madness in the dark of space. Whichever it was, there was no turning back now. He led her deeper through the corridor, nearly stumbling again because she matched his pace too closely, her bare feet silent on the deck. He was hyper-aware of her proximity, so near that occasionally the bioluminescent lines along her arms brushed his own skin, leaving a faint trail of warmth behind. She insisted on tailing him like a shadow, sniffing the air whenever he said something that piqued her interest, which, he quickly learned, was nearly everything. Why do you talk that way, with hesitation in your voice? She asked at one point. Because you're standing too close, he grumbled. She half laughed, a sound like water trickling over stones. I like how you smell. It's comforting. Or maybe just interesting. He coughed, guiding her into a cramped rec room with a small table and a battered bench seat. The stale odor of old protein bars and scuffed rubber plating clung to the walls, and he felt self-conscious about how rundown his vessel was. Look, Zarani, I've got a pilot's bunk over that way. He pointed to a narrow door. And a cargo hold beyond that. Fuel station is on deck B, but you might not want to go poking around. Things are, well, I wasn't expecting guests. She bent her head to examine a series of vents overhead. Her posture looked both curious and guarded, as though expecting an ambush at any moment. If you are uncomfortable, I can try to control my interest in your belongings. He raised an eyebrow. That would be great. Especially the laundry. Something about this entire situation unsettled him. He'd grown used to solitary operations, hunting for salvage, avoiding mercenary crews, drifting station to station just to keep afloat. Now he had a stowaway, an alien woman with a keen sense of smell and zero regard for personal space. The cargo bay hum echoed, accompanied by the flicker of overhead lights as the ship's patchwork generator wobbled. He scratched at his chin. I guess you can stay for a bit, until we figure out your next move. But I need to know, who are you running from? She lowered her gaze, luminous eyes dimming slightly. Slavers. Corsairs of the Taruan system. They captured some of my people. I escaped, but they hunt me because I hold knowledge of our hiding places. Ronan frowned. He knew the type. He'd seen evidence of them on other outposts, their brutality scrawled in laser scars across hulls. Well, if you're in trouble, I'm not exactly a hero or anything, but I can hide you for a bit. Just don't put me on their radar. Zarani nodded in silent understanding. She shifted her weight, and that short cloak slid aside, revealing a glimpse of her midriff patterned with faintly shimmering lines. Some looked like they might be old scars, but it was hard to tell. Her body language felt like something between a cornered animal and an eager observer, both afraid and fascinated by him. He cleared his throat, trying not to stare. Anyway, let's see if we can get you set up somewhere to rest. I'm jumping to Faria station tomorrow to sell off some salvage. Maybe from there, you can figure out your next move. He knew he should probably lock her in a room until he could trust her, but one look at her told him that'd be a bad idea. Her entire being screamed fight or flight readiness. I will stay, she said simply, turning those otherworldly eyes on him again. And I will not steal anything else from you. But your scent, it's everywhere. Especially on your garments. Ronan glowered, heat creeping up his neck. We'll talk about that later. A faint smile traced her lips, but her expression remained oddly neutral, as though they shared a private joke whose punchline only she understood. The hum of the ship's systems provided an uneasy lull as they stood there, two strangers bound by circumstance, each trying to figure out the other's next move. Ronan cleared his throat. So, you hungry? I've got ration packs and water. Nothing fancy. Zarani didn't answer right away. Instead, she lifted her nose and inhaled, probably sorting his pheromones from the stale oxygen. Then she nodded. Yes. I hunger. A twitch at the corner of her mouth gave him the impression she meant more than just food. He decided not to press the issue. He was tired, on edge, and not entirely sure how to handle this new dynamic. So he handed her a ration bar from a tall metal locker. She tore off the wrapping with her teeth, sniffed the bar, and took a bite. Her features registered mild disgust, but she forced it down. Edible. Barely. He barked a rough laugh. Trust me, after a few months out here, you get used to them, or you go crazy. She kept chewing, her glowing lines flickering in mild agitation. We do not have such processed foods. My tribe hunts fresh prey. Or we cultivate aquatic fields. There was a hint of longing in her voice, as though she missed a world far removed from the rusted hull they inhabited. Well, this is all you get for now, unless you're handy in a hydroponic garden. Most of my plants died off weeks ago. He rummaged in a small storage bin and found some bottled water, tossing it her way. She caught it gracefully, the fluid motion of her arms suggesting she had honed reflexes. His gut tightened. If this woman was on the run, she might be a fierce opponent if cornered, or a valuable ally if given the chance. I'll survive, she murmured, flicking open the cap and gulping water in a single swig. Now I would like to rest. The smell of fear still clings to me from the chase. Ronan didn't miss her insinuation that she could sense intangible things like fear. He motioned toward a small door near the back of the rec room. There's a secondary cabin in there. Hardly bigger than a closet. It's private, though. She nodded, swirling past him in a whisper of movement. He tried not to notice how she paused to take in his scent again, nearly pressing her face against his neck, but she gave him enough space not to be rude. At the threshold, she turned. I will repay you. For shelter. For your tolerance. I'm not exactly charging rent, he mumbled. A fleeting smile touched her lips. Then perhaps you want something else from me. His words failed. I only want to not get shot by the slavers you mention, and maybe keep my underwear to myself. She watched him for a heartbeat, her gaze intense. Then she vanished into the small cabin, leaving him alone with a mind swirling in confusion and nerves alight with some strange thrill. Exhausted, he trudged back to the cockpit, half expecting to see new stowaways rummaging through his gear, but the ship was empty aside from the two of them. He collapsed into the pilot's seat, flicked a series of switches, and initiated a short-range scan for any incoming vessels. Nothing. Just the faint echo of cosmic background hiss from the star system. No sign of the Taruan corsairs, at least not yet. Out the viewport, the dead husk of a mining station drifted in silent orbit around a pale pink planet. Ronan had come here to scavenge leftover equipment, maybe something to keep his battered warp drive functional. Instead, he'd found a new kind of trouble, the kind that looked at him with bright turquoise eyes and practically moaned over his scent. His entire body felt keyed up, mind spinning with questions. Who was Zarani, really? Could he trust her? A spike of adrenaline mingled with a pull of curiosity whenever he remembered how closely she'd pressed her body against his, how her luminous lines had pulsed in time with her breathing. Something about that memory made his pulse jump erratically. She was trouble. She was danger. And yet there was something about her presence that banished the gnawing loneliness in his chest. That fact alone worried him more than any threat of slavers. But there was no turning back now. He locked down the ship's external doors from the cockpit and powered down all non-essential systems. The flickering console lights cast dancing shadows along the walls. If he was going to attempt to jump to Faria station tomorrow, he'd need sleep. He forced himself to stand, heading to his own cramped bunk. As he passed the secondary cabin door, he paused, hearing a soft rustle inside. That acute awareness of another living being struck him like a physical force. For months, it had just been him drifting through the void. Now, there was another presence, another heartbeat in the same hull. If he placed his palm against the door, he swore he could almost feel her warmth. Shaking off the ridiculous notion, he retreated to his own bunk and let fatigue claim him. When he closed his eyes, he still felt her breath near his throat, the gentle press of her nose inhaling him like an exotic spice. It stirred something deep, primal, and it was all he could do not to dwell on it before sleep finally overcame him. The next day started with a jolt. Sirens blared across the ship's comm system, jarring him awake. "Damn it!" he hissed, stumbling out of bed. The sensors must have detected incoming ships. Panic thrummed in his veins as he hurried to the cockpit, smacking the control panels until the alarm shut off. The readouts showed a single craft entering the mining station's orbit, scanning the debris field. It wasn't big, and its transponder ID read as nothing official. Possibly pirates or mercenaries. The Taruan corsairs? He cursed under his breath. With no time to waste, he keyed the intercom. "Zarani, we have company." A heartbeat later, she was at the doorway of the cockpit, eyes blazing with alarm. "They found me." "We don't know that yet. Could be random salvage hunters." She shook her head. "Their approach pattern is too methodical." He hated how right she might be. "All right, we'll slip out of here. The jump drive is half busted, but maybe I can spool up enough to get us to Faria station." She hovered beside him as he worked frantically at the console, flipping switches and punching in coordinates. Her presence practically vibrated with tension. "Should I hide?" "Not unless they try to board. We can outrun them." The ship's engine whined in protest as the battered thrusters came online. The scan showed the other craft pivoting in their direction. A surge of dread rolled through Ronan. "Strap in," he barked, toggling the lockdown on all hatches. She sank into the co-pilot seat, searching for a harness that didn't exist. So she clung to the sides, muscles rigid. "I can fight if needed," she murmured. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." He jammed the throttle forward. His vessel lurched away from the station, leaving behind the twisted metal remains he'd intended to salvage. The pursuing craft accelerated too. A stray beam of laser fire cut across the void, singing the edge of an asteroid. "Damn it!" he hissed again. "They're definitely after us." He coaxed more speed from the engines, sweat beading at his brow. Sparks flew from the overhead panel as the ship's ancient wiring threatened to fry. Warning lights cascaded across the console. But the warp drive gauge inched up. 60%, 70-80. The next volley of laser fire struck them square on the aft plating, jolting the ship so hard that Ronan's teeth clacked together. Alarms shrieked. "Hull breach in cargo bay 1. The automated voice droned. Zarani let out a low snarl. "They want to cripple us." "I won't let them." Ronan's heart pounded. 90% on the warp spool. If they could last just a little longer. The second blast knocked them sideways, but he wrestled the controls. The warp drive beeped readiness. "Hold on!" He slammed the activation switch. The stars outside elongated into streaks, and with a thunderous roar, the ship lurched into faster-than-light travel, leaving the pursuers behind. A wave of relief mingled with the sharp tang of terror in his mouth. He realized he was clenching his jaw so tight it hurt. Slowly, the console stopped sparking, though the damage reports kept scrolling. Zarani's grip on the co-pilot's seat finally relaxed. Her luminous lines flickered with agitation, or maybe with cautious victory. "We escaped," she whispered. "For now," he said, pushing out a breath. "The jump drive's going to burn out if I keep pushing it. We'll have to drop out soon and pray we're near Faria station." Zarani nodded, though tension still radiated from her posture. These slavers, they won't stop until they capture me, or until they lose track of my scent. I can sense them, their hunger for power. Ronan studied her. Well, let's stay ahead of them. I've got a contact at the station who can hide us if things get hot. She frowned, turning her gaze on him. You would do that? You just met me. He sighed, rolling a stiff shoulder. I'm not the best at doing the wise thing. But I figure you didn't choose to get hunted. So I'll help. She looked away, her expression momentarily fragile. Then she stood and reached across him, her face inches from his. He held his breath, expecting her to sniff him again, but she didn't. Instead, she lightly pressed her forehead to his, the glow from her body warming the air between them. His pulse thundered at the sudden intimacy. In my culture, she murmured, this is a gesture of gratitude. She kept her forehead there for a moment, then withdrew. Thank you? Ronan exhaled slowly. You're welcome, he managed, though his voice sounded thick. Now, let's see if we can keep the ship from falling apart while we make the next jump. She nodded, stepping back. But that electric tension still sparked between them like a live wire. He wondered if she felt it too, or if this closeness was just normal for her species. Her eyes lingered on him, and he swore he saw a question there, unspoken. Then she slipped into the corridor, presumably to inspect the hull breach. He raked a hand through his hair, mouth dry, heart hammering in a rhythm that spelled trouble. The warped corridor flickered around them, the battered engines groaning. With the Taruan scum behind them, at least for the moment, he had a chance to reflect on how drastically his life had changed in the span of a night. If they survived, he'd figure out what to do about the smoldering tension that threatened to consume them both. For now, survival was enough. They dropped out of warp near the Faria system, battered and limping but still in one piece. Faria Station glowed in the distance, a ring-shaped complex orbiting a turquoise gas giant. Merchant ships, cargo haulers, and patrol cruisers busied themselves in the docking lanes, all dwarfed by the station's flickering neon signage. Ronan guided the ship to a maintenance berth on the station's underside, cursing under his breath at the docking fees that would no doubt cripple his meager funds. But it was a chance to repair the hull breach and maybe scrounge up new parts. With a shudder, the ship clamped onto the station's docking arm, and the internal systems shifted to standby. Zarani appeared behind him, looking out the viewport at the swirling traffic. This place is huge, she said, voice hushed. Can we hide among them all? Ronan shrugged. Hopefully. But keep your hood up, your glow hidden. This station is a crossroads for all sorts of unsavory folk, so let's not attract attention if we can help it. She nodded, pulling her short cloak tighter. The faint shimmer along her neck dimmed as if she could will her bioluminescence to subside. I will follow. He inhaled, steadying himself. All right. Let's go. Their first steps into Faria Station assaulted them with a riot of stimuli, the hustle of machinery, the clang of metal walkways, the babble of dozens of languages interwoven with the hiss of steam vents. Neon lights strobed across the walls, advertising everything from black market cybernetics to off-world liquors. Ronan hated it, the chaotic swirl of people and the ever-present risk of being recognized by one of his old enemies. But at least it was better than floating in vacuum. Zarani stuck close, every so often breathing in sharp, shallow sniffs as though overwhelmed by the station's cocktail of smells. He guessed it must be disorienting for a species that relies so heavily on scent for communication. She leaned into him more than once, her shoulder brushing his. Each time, his heart gave an involuntary stutter. He forced himself to focus on the job, find a quiet docking official, pay under the table for repairs, and stay out of trouble. Easier said than done. He led her through a series of narrow corridors, forging a path toward an old contact named Derek's. The man ran a back-alley repair operation out of a rusting sub-level workshop. If anyone could fix a hull breach without asking prying questions, it was him. Ronan! Derek's greeted him with a sly grin, exposing a row of gold teeth. Long time. Didn't think I'd see you in these parts after that fiasco on Helia 4. Ronan grimaced. Yeah, well, I'm full of surprises. Listen, I need my hull patched, quietly, and I need a new warp coupler if you've got one. Derek's gaze slid past Ronan to Zarani, curiosity lighting his features. Who's the friend? She kept her cloak hood up, face partially hidden in shadow. A partner, Ronan answered a bit too quickly. None of your concern. Derek's grin widened, but he raised his hands in feigned surrender. All right. I've got the parts. The hush job costs extra, you know. Ronan sighed, fishing out the credit chips he'd saved from his last salvage haul. It hurt to hand them over, but survival demanded it. We'll be docked in berth 9. Get it done in under a day, if possible. I'll see what I can do, Derek said. He pocketed the chips, then flicked a glance at Zarani once more. Enjoy the station, but watch yourself. Word is, a crew of Taran enforcers arrived an hour ago, looking for someone. Ronan tensed. You sure? Derek's nodded. They parked a sleek black gunship in the upper ring. No official reason, just scoping around, flashing credits. Usually means they're hunting a bounty. A cold pit formed in Ronan's stomach. He tossed a sidelong look at Zarani. Her posture stiffened, hands balled at her sides. We'll be careful, he muttered to Derek's, stepping away. He guided Zarani back into the corridor, weaving through the crowd. Their footsteps clicked on the grated floor, tension building with every step. Her breathing sounded shallow, and she sometimes jerked her head up, scanning the crowds. Slavers here. So soon, she said under her breath. We jumped away from them, but they must have had other ships, he replied. This place is big enough that we can still hide, but we have to be smart. She said nothing, jaw tight with worry. Ronan's heart banged in his chest. The station's noise assaulted them, but he spotted a batted sign for a small lodging area. We can rent a room for the night. Lay low while Derek's repairs the ship. Zarani looked dubious but followed. Once inside the lodging district, with flickering overhead lights and a bored attendant behind a bulletproof window, Ronan paid for a single, windowless room. It was cramped and smelled like stale cigarettes. The bed creaked under the slightest pressure. The station was hardly five-star accommodations, but it was out of the public eye. He bolted the door behind them, leaning back against it with a sigh. Not exactly glamorous, he admitted, but safer than wandering around. She removed her hood, letting the cloak fall open. Her glowing lines had dulled to a faint shimmer, less noticeable under the harsh fluorescent lighting. Thank you, she said softly. Ronan felt a rush of heat. They were alone again, in close quarters. His mind flicked back to that moment in the ship's corridor when she pressed her face into his neck. He tried to banish the memory, but it clung to him, stirring something deep. You look tired, she observed, pointing to the sag in his shoulders. I haven't slept well lately. Because of me? Because of everything. We nearly got ourselves killed. She took a cautious step closer, eyes studying him. I can sense your heart rate. It's elevated. A wry laugh escaped him. That's because you're standing extremely close, and you sniffed my underwear. Her lips curved into a subtle grin. I was curious. You humans have such interesting customs. You hide so much of yourselves in layers of cloth and caution. My people are more direct. He forced a shaky exhale. Right. Well, direct is one word for it. Silence settled between them, thick with unspoken tension. Ronan cleared his throat and gestured to the single bed in the corner. There's only one bed. I'll sleep on the floor. Zarani frowned. Why? Because it would be weird otherwise, he said, aware of how foolish he sounded. She tilted her head, luminous lines flickering in confusion. You humans have so many rules about physical closeness, yet you crave contact. I smell it on you, an underlying longing. Heat flared across his cheeks. That's not something I planned on discussing, especially not in this crummy room. She stepped closer until he could see the tiny flecks of silver in her turquoise irises. Ronan, you saved me from capture. You risk your own safety to hide me. I do not understand your ways, but I know gratitude. I know that if we share a bond, it might strengthen our unity against danger. He swallowed. Share a bond? A physical bond. Her voice was low, thrumming with a resonance that made his skin prickle. We can calm each other's fear, steady our breathing, align our hearts. He felt that primal jolt again. She was offering something intangible but also deeply intimate. My people, we bond by breathing each other's scent. She went on, stepping near enough that their chests almost touched. It is not only about reproduction. It's about trust, about connecting on a deeper level. He was torn between intrigue and wariness. Zarani, I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything. Her expression softened. It is not obligation. It is curiosity. And perhaps more. A shiver coursed through him as she raised a hand to his face, her fingertips trailing along his cheek in a whisper-soft caress. I sense you are lonely, she said, reading the flicker in his eyes. I smell your longing like a faint pulse in your scent. Let me ease that, if only for tonight. He opened his mouth to protest, but the words dried up. Despite the cramped, dingy room, the tension felt electric. He'd spent so long drifting through the stars, never letting anyone close, always playing it safe, burying any desire for connection under layers of self-reliance. Yet here was someone who offered closeness so openly, even if it was born of her alien culture's norms. The edge of his caution warred with the heat of his curiosity. Okay, he breathed at last, voice shaking. She leaned in, pressing her forehead to his again. That simple contact sent a rush of warmth flooding his veins. Her luminous lines pulsed, matching the erratic tempo of his heartbeat. He felt her inhale softly, and he inhaled too, drawn into her unique scent, a faint musk like ocean minerals and wild blossoms. Their breath intermingled in the still air. His skin prickled with awareness, every nerve alive to the soft brush of her body against his. Slowly, she slid her arms around him, holding him in a gentle embrace that felt wholly unfamiliar yet achingly welcome. He exhaled into her neck, letting the tension of the day drain from his shoulders. The moment stretched, a fragile bubble of shared vulnerability. He felt her pulse thrumming, or maybe it was his own, amplified by the closeness. His breath caught when her lips grazed his jaw, a tentative gesture that made him gasp. Without thinking, he angled his head and found her mouth, tasting her tentative, curious kiss. It was unlike any kiss he'd shared with a human lover. Her lips were soft, but the moment felt new, almost exploratory, as though she were memorizing the shape of him. A quiet sound escaped her throat, somewhere between a purr and a sigh. He cradled the back of her head, fingers tangling in the silky folds of her hair. The glow of her markings surged brighter, illuminating the small room in gentle pulses. The sensation was mesmerizing, as though he were touching living starlight. Gently, carefully, they sank down onto the edge of the bed. 100 thoughts bombarded him, about the danger of the slavers, about the price on her head, about the possibility he was making a grave mistake. But all of it receded in the face of her warmth against him. He registered the hitch in her breath, the slight tremble in her limbs. She was no more certain than he was, but they both chased this fleeting solace. The bed springs squeaked. He steadied her, his hands cautious and respectful. Their kisses deepened, spurred by unspoken need. She let out a low sound, half frustrated, half desperate, and grasped at his shirt, pushing it upward. Her intensity made him dizzy, every sense on alert. They pulled apart for a moment, foreheads still touching, panting in shallow bursts. We should be careful, he murmured, feeling half-drunk on the taste of her. Careful about what? She asked, voice thick with emotion. The future. The danger. She shook her head, luminous markings shimmering with each heartbeat. Danger is always near. If we wait for safety, we wait forever. Her words struck him like a truth he'd known but never voiced. In that moment, caution fell away. Their mouths collided again, a frenzy of mutual discovery. Her nails raked lightly down his back, sending sparks of sensation dancing across his nerves. His shirt went tumbling to the floor, quickly joined by pieces of her cloak. As her bioluminescent skin pressed against his bare chest, He marveled at the warm glow that seemed to pulse in time with their kisses. Their legs tangled, the cramped bed forcing them even closer. He found himself mapping the smooth lines of her shoulders, the gentle curve of her waist, the intriguing ridges and patterns that adorned her back. She shivered under his touch, breath catching. A surge of tenderness mingled with the urgent flame in his blood. For too long, he'd been alone, drifting from port to port, never letting anyone close enough to matter. Now Zarani was in his arms, a living contradiction, fragile yet formidable, cautious yet unflinchingly bold in her desire for connection. She pulled back just enough to look him in the eye, her own shimmering with an inner light. "Ronan," she whispered, voice trembling with something like awe. He brushed a lock of hair from her forehead, swallowing a lump in his throat. "Zarani." They needed no more words in that moment. The hush of the station outside, the flicker of a faulty neon sign beyond their door, none of it mattered. All that existed was the shared warmth of skin, the thrum of two heartbeats, and the taste of possibility on each other's lips. Time lost meaning as they explored each other, gradually surrendering to a gentle tide of intimacy that neither of them fully understood but both of them craved. Her skin glowed with each trembling breath, the patterns shifting in mesmerizing swirls. Sometimes she let out a soft moan, a foreign warble that sounded like ocean currents. She was all new textures and shapes, her physiology a map he navigated with cautious reverence. In turn, her exploring hands read the lines of his muscles, the planes of his chest, and the subtle scars that marked his years of scrapes. Passion flared, momentarily fierce, as their kisses became deeper, more urgent. Yet at no point did either of them rush. They fed on each other's slow, burning desire, building a rhythm of rising tension and careful release. Zarani's body responded to his every touch with shifts of luminescence, each pattern telling its own story of blossoming trust and raw vulnerability. He lost track of time. Hours, minutes, they blurred. They found a gentle unity, a sense of belonging carved out of this dingy station bunk, amid fear and uncertainty. When they finally stilled, breath mingling in the hush, an unspoken bond had formed, fragile yet real. Ronan rested his forehead against hers, exhaustion and satiation interwoven. She brushed her fingers over his jaw, tracing the stubble there. "I feel calm now," she murmured, almost wonderingly. He nodded, swallowing a knot of emotion. "Me too." For a while, they simply lay together, hearts settling into an easy cadence. He listened to the station's distant hum, the churn of air recyclers, the soft rattle of conduits behind the walls. Against his chest, Zarani's breathing evened, her body slack with the peaceful weight of contentment. But eventually, reality began to claw at the edges of his mind. The Taruan slavers, the repairs to his ship, the limited time they had before someone recognized her. As if sensing his rising tension, Zarani lifted her head. "We can't stay here," she said quietly, echoing his thoughts. "No," he agreed, smoothing a hand over her arm. "We'll leave once Derek's finishes the repairs. If those slavers are searching for you, this station won't stay safe for long." She nodded, the determined lines of her face returning. "We must return to my homeworld, to warn my people. The Taruan are expanding. They will come from my tribe." Ronan studied her, searching her gaze. "And you think you can rally them, protect them? If I can find my older sister, she is a strong leader among our kind. But I do not know where she is. Rumor says she's been taken or forced into exile." He drew a slow breath. "Then we'll track her down." Zarani's eyes flickered with gratitude, overshadowed by lingering fear. "I do not want to drag you into this. You have your own life, your own path." He let out a breathy chuckle. "My path is drifting across the galaxy on a half-broken ship, scrounging for parts. Helping you, it feels like there's more meaning in that than anything I've done lately." She pressed her palm against his chest, right over his heart. "Thank you," she whispered, her lips curling into a small, vulnerable smile. He covered her hand with his own. "We'll figure it out. Together." They lingered in each other's warmth a moment longer before the station's overhead speaker crackled, announcing some shift change in the docking schedule. Reluctantly, They disentangled themselves, moving with newfound familiarity, as though last night had cemented a trust that neither of them dared question. It wasn't just lust. It was something deeper, the fragile beginnings of genuine connection. They dressed quickly, rummaging for clothing that would keep Zarani's distinctive features hidden. Ronan gave her a spare shirt to layer under her cloak, the fabric holding faint traces of his scent. She seemed almost pleased by that, wearing it like a shield. Then they stepped into the corridor, keeping their heads low. The neon glare and bustle of Faria station assaulted them anew, and the tension of potential discovery weighed on every step. Yet there was an unspoken accord. They walked side by side now, shoulders sometimes brushing, and each subtle contact reminded them of the night's shared closeness. Ronan led her to a cramped diner in one of the quieter sublevels. The smell of frying grease and stale coffee assaulted them, but it was discreet enough that they could grab a quick meal without too many prying eyes. They settled into a booth, Zarani adjusting her cloak. A tired-looking waitress approached, took their order, and left. "What is this smell?" Zarani asked, nose wrinkling. "Burnt animal fat, I think. Some kind of cheap protein." She made a face. "My people prefer fresh, natural." Ronan gave her a wry smile. "Yeah, well, not much of that on a station like this." He checked the time on a battered wrist implant. "Derek said he'd need a day, but maybe we should check on him sooner. I don't like the idea of walking around with Terran enforcers hunting you." Zarani was about to reply when the diner door whooshed open and 3 large figures strode in, scanning the room with predatory awareness. Ronan froze. They wore dark clothing, each armed with sidearms strapped to their thighs, their posture screaming danger. His stomach twisted. He'd seen Terran enforcers before, and these men matched the type. Zarani stiffened across from him, face concealed by the cloak's hood. He reached under the table, lightly gripping her hand in warning. The men approached the counter, speaking in low voices to the waitress. Ronan tried to calm his racing pulse. If they kept their heads down, maybe these enforcers wouldn't notice them in the far booth. But one of them turned, scanning the diner's patrons. His gaze slowed as it passed over Ronan and Zarani, then whipped back, a predatory grin forming on his lips. "Hey you!" he barked, stepping closer. Ronan's stomach sank. Zarani tensed, ready to bolt. "Something wrong?" Ronan asked, forcing a casual tone. The enforcer's nostrils flared. "Station's on alert for a particular alien female. Heard anything about that?" Ronan shrugged. "No. Just me and my partner here, passing through." The man stepped closer, peering under Zarani's hood. She angled her face away, but he reached out to grab her shoulder. In a flash, she reacted, seizing his wrist and twisting it with such speed that the enforcer crashed onto the table, scattering cutlery. The other 2 roared, drawing weapons. Adrenaline spiked in Ronan's veins. He kicked the table into one of them, knocking the man off balance, and lunged for the door, dragging Zarani with him. Laser shots pierced the air, leaving scorch marks in the wall. The waitress screamed, patrons scattering in a panic. "Move!" Ronan barked, shoving Zarani ahead of him. They burst onto the station's promenade, weaving through startled onlookers as more bolts of energy sizzled past. Security alarms started blaring. Ronan cursed under his breath, scanning for an exit. The enforcers were close behind, screaming for them to halt. Zarani ran with uncanny speed, her cloak trailing behind. Ronan struggled to keep pace, hard hammering, fear and a fierce protectiveness fueling his limbs. Overhead, the station's lights strobed red. People dove out of the way as they dashed toward an elevator cluster. "We can't outrun them forever," Zarani panted, her eyes wild. "We need to get back to the ship. Derek's can patch it later, or not at all." "Agreed," Ronan growled, slamming the elevator panel. The doors whooshed open, and they stumbled inside. He hit the berth level button, only to hear the enforcers shout, "Stop them!" The doors slid shut just as a flurry of laser fire peppered the corridor. The elevator lurched downward, carrying them away from immediate danger. But Ronan knew it was only a matter of time before station security joined the chase. "We have to move fast," he told her, chest heaving. She nodded, adrenaline lighting her glowing lines. The elevator stopped with a chime, and they bolted out, heading for berth 9. The docking arm came into view, along with Derek's workshop. Ronan saw the mechanic's startled face as they skidded to a halt. "What the hell's going on?" Derek's demanded. "Change of plans?" Ronan gasped. "They're on to us. We're leaving." Derek's threw his hands up. "Ship's not fully repaired. The hull patch is done, but the warp coupler is half installed. You jump now, you might fry your entire drive." Ronan glanced at Zarani's terrified face. "We have no choice." An alarm blared in the distance, closer now. Derek's muttered a curse. "I'll hold them off. But you owe me for the lost time, you hear?" Ronan gave him a grateful nod and sprinted toward his vessel. Zarani followed, her fear fueling her speed. They slapped the docking panel, and the ship's hatch slid open. Once inside, Ronan sealed the airlock. Lights flickered, console screens spitting error messages. "Let's just hope the patch holds," he muttered, rushing to the cockpit. He initiated the thrusters as Zarani strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat, breath ragged. "Thank you," she managed, voice tight. "Don't thank me yet," he said, grim-faced. "We might not survive takeoff." The berth doors hissed open, revealing a corridor full of station security. They raised rifles as his ship tried to disengage from the docking clamps. Shots fired, rattling the hull. Zarani let out a cry, covering her ears. Ronan yanked on the controls, pushing the thrusters to maximum. Metal groaned, and the clamps strained, but finally, with a squeal of tearing metal, the ship broke free, spinning away from the berth. The external cameras showed station cops diving for cover. The engines roared, and they shot into open space, weaving among the traffic. A patrol cruiser moved to block them. "Brace!" Ronan yelled, engaging every ounce of skill he had. He threaded the battered ship through a narrow gap between cargo freighters, ignoring the shrieks of proximity alarms. The cruiser tried to follow but got stuck behind a massive tanker. "Yes!" Zarani exclaimed, relief shining in her eyes. Ronan felt no such relief. Not yet. Another reading popped up on the scanner. The Taruan gunship, black and menacing, was angling to intercept them. "Damn it!" he hissed, hands sweating on the yoke. The battered warp drive spool read 75%. With the incomplete coupler, it might blow them all to pieces if they tried to jump too soon. But a hail of laser fire from the Taruan gunship hammered the shields, draining them dangerously. "We have to risk it," Zarani said, voice trembling but determined. "If we stay, we die or get captured." Ronan nodded, heart slamming. He steadied the controls, closed his eyes for one split second, and hit the warp button. The engine howled, the ship bucked violently, and for an agonizing moment, it felt like the hull might tear itself apart. Then the stars stretched in that familiar swirl, and they catapulted into the shimmering corridor of faster-than-light travel. They were free, for now. In the cockpit's tense glow, Ronan sagged in his seat, breath uneven. Zarani reached over, resting a hand on his arm. "You did it," she whispered, eyes reflecting relief and admiration. "We did it," he corrected, brushing his fingertips over her knuckles. She offered him a shaky smile. But then the console flickered, and the entire ship lurched. Sparks rained from the overhead panel, and the warp corridor flickered alarmingly. "Come on, hold together," Ronan pleaded, wrestling with the failing controls. Emergency systems beeped in a rapid-fire barrage, warning of coolant leaks, power surges, and possible drive overload. Zarani's expression tightened. "We're not safe yet." With trembling hands, Ronan fought to keep them in the warp corridor, scanning for any stable exit. The coupler was misaligned, draining power. They risked dropping out of warp in the middle of nowhere, or worse, having a warp breach that would tear the ship apart. "I see a system up ahead," he rasped, eyes flicking to the NAV screen. "Desolate region, but we might be able to drop out safely and regroup." She nodded, tension etched in the lines of her face. "Do it." With teeth gritted, he initiated a forced drop from warp. The ship shuddered, The engines screamed in protest, and then they ripped back into normal space. Outside the viewport stretched a star field as endless as it was empty. A pale orange planet loomed in the distance. No immediate sign of ships. They were alone. But the consoles still displayed critical warnings. "We have to land and fix this," Ronan said, heart pounding. "Or we'll be sitting ducks." "That planet," Zarani noted, pointing to the glowing orb. "We can land there?" He frowned at the readouts. "Barely. It's got a thick atmosphere and desert conditions. If we can find a stable patch of ground, we can set down. But I can't promise we'll ever get airborne again if the drive fails completely." She swallowed, determination sparking in her eyes. "Better that than drifting helplessly." He nodded, adjusting course. The ship groaned, battered thrusters firing up as they limped toward the planet. For the next half hour, they descended through layers of swirling orange dust. Turbulence rattled the hull, sending fresh sparks flying from the damaged panels. Ronan fought the controls, sweat pouring down his temples. The ground raced up to meet them, a barren expanse of reddish dunes broken by jagged rock formations. "Hold on!" he shouted. They slammed onto the sand with bone-jarring force, bouncing once, twice, before skidding to a halt in a cloud of dust. Metal screamed, and the nose of the ship dug into the dune. Finally, with a thunderous crunch, they stopped. Silence descended, broken only by the crackling of damaged electronics. Ronan blinked, inhaling shallowly. The emergency lights flickered, painting the cockpit in a ghostly hue. "You alive?" he croaked. Zarani coughed, brushing tangles of hair from her face. "Yes." Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, but she was conscious, eyes fierce. "We landed. Crash-landed, more like," he muttered, unstrapping himself. He grabbed a med kit from under the console and turned to check her wound. She flinched but let him clean it, eyes never leaving his face. He swallowed hard, shaken by how close they'd come to dying. "We might be stuck here unless I can jury-rig the warp drive or at least fix the thrusters," he said grimly. Zarani exhaled shakily. "Then we do what must be done. I will help." He nodded, pressing a makeshift bandage to her cut. "Yeah. We'll figure it out." Something in her gaze told him they'd reached a turning point. It wasn't just about escape anymore. It was about survival together, forging a bond strong enough to outlast the constant threat. And despite the chaos, the fear, and the unknown expanse of desert around them, a strange hope welled in Ronan's chest. He realized he wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't just a stowaway or a stranger. They were partners in a struggle that had become as much emotional as it was physical. The desert winds whipped outside, rattling the hull. Stranded on an alien world, pursued by relentless hunters, they had no guarantee of escape. But in the flickering lights of the battered cockpit, Ronan found himself staring into Zarani's luminous eyes, and for the first time in a long while, he felt that maybe, just maybe, they had a fighting chance, together. And that thought ignited a fierce determination deep within him that he hadn't felt in years. A determination to protect her, to see this through, and to discover what lay beyond the horizon of their precarious bond. He cupped her cheek gently, searching her gaze. She placed her hand over his, her markings shimmering despite the pain and exhaustion etched on her face. "We'll survive," she said quietly, as though stating an unshakable fact. Ronan nodded, letting the warmth of her conviction settle into his own battered soul. "Yeah," he whispered. "We will."